What's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of the Well Man's Podcast. My name is Brian Brosey. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, Keoni Tita. Keoni, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful, and I'm excited about this podcast because this is something I do every weekend. I do deadlifts for my work, my leg day. So I really want to talk to a doctor of physical therapy, Brian, to make sure that I'm doing that right.
Yeah, so you do them about once a week?
I come away with a sore back, huh?
Oh yeah,
I do them every. They're always added into my leg workout. And one of my New Year's resolutions was, is it possible to deadlift 400 pounds at my age?
Okay.
I'm not even close, but
I don't think I am either on that.
But anyway, so that's one of the things I'm working up towards. But one of the things about my deadlift, I really don't know, other than watching YouTube videos and stuff like that and repetitively doing it over and over again. I'm not really sure if my form is playing a role in holding me back on it.
Yeah. So we'll talk about a few tips to really kind of clear up the form, or how you should kind of think about performing a deadlift. But that's one of the biggest misconceptions, I think, is people thinking that their low back should be sore. As a matter of fact, doing the deadlift properly should really reinforce and strengthen your back in a way that leaves your back feeling good, as opposed to sore and achy and not so great at the end of the deadlift. And I love that you're doing it once or twice a week, obviously, depending on kind of the weight and those sorts of things. And then where I became so interested in the deadlift is, funny enough, your resolution. My resolution last year was to end the year completely pain-free, no painful lower back, no painful XYZ, because I had herniated a disc in my back about 2 years ago, deadlifting sloppily. And that really
is that right? Damn.
Yeah, that really helped me kind of reinforce. I remember it was December 21st, like 2020.
Damn. Okay.
And it was a pretty debilitating. It was December 21st, and I remember not being able to pick up a gift from below the Christmas tree. Christmas Day. And obviously I see a lot of this as a whole, just back pain and that sort of thing, as a physical therapist in the clinic. And just as a reminder, we did do, I think we called it Dissecting the Deadlift, episode 45, with Dr. Brianne Showman Brown. She's a physical therapist as well.
Yeah, she's great. I remember that one.
She's strong too. So she definitely proves it. She definitely proves it.
Oh, she's an inspiration to me. She basically did, I saw him the other day on one of her videos. She did free weight, muscle up. She did it easy on the ropes, on the ropes. She did.
Yeah. The rings and stuff.
The rings, which is really, really hard. I mean, I've been trying to do that for years. And we probably should do a podcast on that, get an expert on that. But anyway, yeah, she's amazing.
And so what we'll do here is I hope to give everybody, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of big, pre-deadlift things. So, for you, Keoni, that morning or whatever time that you're actually going to go do that deadlift on Saturdays or over the weekend, kind of some things you should reinforce, do and do not do to be able to prepare to safely do the deadlift, especially if you're going to be lifting a significant amount of weight. So for the podcast here, I did want to just touch on, obviously, there's a lot of deadlift variations, like sumo deadlifts, and there's tons and a variety of types of ways you can do a deadlift. Here, the primary way I want us to think about it, just within this podcast and kind of the deadlift I'm talking about here, is like you're picking up a box off the ground. So really, the feet are kind of hip or shoulder distance apart. We're not changing any specifics. There's no high hip part. There's not a sumo, not a wide leg stance. Just kind of how you would think about if you got an Amazon box and you reach down to pick it up and pick it up and come back up to standing. That's basically what we're talking about here. So nothing too, no specific type of deadlift is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to talk about a variety of exercises that you can do in that pre-deadlifting routine, or to kind of get ready to do a deadlift. As always, I have a video on YouTube of most of these little exercises. I'm not going to break them down for the sake of keeping this podcast short, but if you hear an exercise as we work through this list, just type in my name, Bryan Brozy, into Google or YouTube, followed by the name of the exercise, and I should be the first suggested video. And I'll spend much more time in those videos kind of detailing how to properly do these exercises and stuff like that. And if you do use those, please give me a like, subscribe, comment, little smiley face, anything to make us feel good and help more people.
Those videos are great. I put them on my well plans to all my patients, and they love them.
Awesome.
And they're easy. You know, you explain this stuff really easily.
Yeah, and then they should be like
nonsense.
Yeah, 3 or 5 minutes.
Yeah,
fully encompassing the exercise.
Right.
And that's why I'm not going to touch on it too much here. But if you hear an exercise like bird dog, for example, and you're like, hey, I don't know what that is, I'm not going to explain it. Just type in my name, the bird dog, and it should pull right up and really explain it. Cool. So let's get into it. So the first thing, pre-deadlift routine, when we're thinking about getting ready to get up under the bar, get the bar underneath us and lift it up, I really want us first and foremost to connect with our core musculature. So to get some core control, really develop that spinal stabilization, kind of like we talked about in some of our previous podcast episodes. We did one on spinal stabilization. We've done a lot on lower back pain and core training. All of that would help. But the reason why is this connecting with your abdominal core musculature. It's going to help maintain the natural neutral curves of the spine, which we did an episode on the natural curves of the spine just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, just recently.
And that's going to help just ensure you are in a good, safe position to lift heavier weights or perform this movement. There's a lot of debate on how much of a flex spine could maybe hurt your back or not hurt your back. In general, you're definitely in a safer position and you're going to be more efficient by having those natural curves maintained. And they do see in the research, you know, when we think of like training our biceps in the gym, maybe we think of doing it 2-3 times a week, you know, hitting them in our bodybuilding type routine. With the core exercises, they really do show much better research and much better engagement with your core if you're hitting these exercises daily. And it doesn't have to be much, but the point here, and that's why I call this point kind of connecting with the core musculature, is just to fire these muscles, get in tune with them mentally, and really kind of keep that core control as you're performing this movement. So we're going to try and fire these core muscles and maintain that abdominal corset we've talked about in previous episodes to maintain that nice, neutral, safe spinal posture. How we're going to do that is those exercises like the bird dog, the Palloff press, or the side planks. So number one, we're thinking about deadlifting that day. Let's go ahead and let's connect with our core musculature, our transverse abdominis, multifidus, obliques, all that kind of stuff, and really stiffen up in a safe way our lower back so we can pull some weight from the ground. So that's number one. Number two,
what about other core, like I don't know, when I hear core, most people, when I think of core, they think, oh, I'm going to work my abs, my abdominals.
Yeah.
So what about like stereotypical ab exercises?
Yeah. So like a crunch and things like that, certainly. And that's what I think of when you just say stereotypical, like a crunch or someone trying to train that 6-pack type core. That's not going to hurt. But what we really want to think about here is kind of protecting. That's why I love the bird dog, is we're going to kind of provide this protective extension, like strengthen, you know, we're doing crunches. We're flexing our spine.
Right.
And here I want to focus on, and all these exercises, if you look them up, are all about maintaining that neutral spinal position. So
yeah. And bird dog's kind of extension, right? Back extension, seems like. If
you're doing it incorrectly, there's a lot of movement. If you're doing it how I would like you to do it, or if I explain in that video.
So watch the video. Yeah.
Yeah. It's all about, and a lot of these exercises, how I describe it, like the bird dog, the side plank, the Palloff press, and this connecting with your core as a whole. What I mean here is limiting the movement that your upper extremities are going to kind of transfer to your lower back. So it's about maintaining natural stiff core and maintaining the position of the core despite all the movement or these external loads. So like for the bird dog, for example, your leg or your arm or both may be swinging out. And the whole point I want you to have, especially when you're about to deadlift, is maintaining a nice neutral spinal posture, not letting that movement of the extremities transfer into the core. So really trying to basically not move the core, as opposed to like a crunch where you're moving the lumbar spine, you're moving the core quite a bit.
Okay.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
So you're not really doing extension to hit the, okay, that's great.
I'm trying not to move the core. And that's the big thing I like to drive home about just training the core. Yeah, if you're going to we did an episode on like doing the 6-pack and training the 6-pack. And I talked about how you need a posterior pelvic tilt. And that would be a lot of spinal flexion that you would go into.
Like Superwoman, Supermans, and
Well, so Superman, Superwoman, you're laying on your belly, right? So you're doing a lot more extension if we're
Yeah,
talking about the same
right,
exercise versus like a crunch, you're crunching, doing a lot of flexion.
right.
And for this purpose, and that's all great. I mean, there's nothing inherently wrong with any of that. Don't want anyone to get that opinion. And especially if you want to develop your six pack, you know, you want to take off your shirt and actually see the rectus abdominis, you're going to need to do crunches and things like that. But when we're thinking about, hey, we're about to try and pull 400 pounds off the ground, I want your back, your lower back in particular, to be nice and stable. So as you pull that weight up from the ground, you're not rounding out and putting undue stress on your back. And that's where these exercises, where it's all about limiting spinal movement, come into play, but you're really stressing the core if you do it properly.
Yeah, and if you see a proper deadlift, there's no spinal movement really. It's all coming from below. I mean, you're certainly not rounding that back out at all.
Right.
It's keeping a neutral spine.
Right. And so that's a great point. I do train my core kind of with some of those traditional exercises, and I may do that before the deadlift, but I'm also going to do these more stabilizing focus exercises as well. But so that's point number one. The first thing I really want you to do, connect with the core musculature, get in tune with it, and create that nice, neutral, stable spine. Number two is really engage the lats. So if we think about real good deadlifting, or if you watch like an Olympic deadlift, the bar doesn't really move. You know, it stays in a straight line, doesn't move horizontally.
Right. So it stays vertical and stays in that plane.
Yes. And I think we talked about it, I'm pretty sure, on episode 45 with Dr. Brian Showman Brown, about trying to keep the bar as close to your body as possible. And that just helps make the movement more efficient and really decreases the stress on your lower back. And so that's why engaging the lats is so important, because the reason we're going to do that is to keep the bar as close to possible as the body, reduce that stress on the lumbar spine, and make the movement as efficient as possible. And so things we can do to ignite that, we could think like traditional lat pull down, pull up, and stuff like that. And all of that is great. But I would kind of, again, focusing on lack of movement here, or kind of rehearsing exactly what we want in the deadlift. For the deadlift, we just want these lats engaged, so our palms or our hands stay kind of glued to our body as they slide up, as we stand up and drag that bar and that vertical line. So what I do is I do like a lat pull down, essentially, where I'm just straight arm lat pull down. And I like that straight arm because that's exactly how you're lifting the weight with the deadlift. So for example, take a resistance band, throw it on like a chin up bar, and keep your arms straight and squeeze those shoulder blades down and back, and just bring your hands straight down to your pockets, and do a few reps and sets of those to really get that exact same engagement, where your hands are going to kind of be pushing into your thighs and into your core to maintain that similar engagement that you want when you're lifting the bar up off the ground, and keeping it kind of in that nice vertical line against your body. So it's all about trying to rehearse exactly what you're going to do and really get in tune with that. So like I was saying, a lat pull down, would it start engaging your lats? Sure, but it's a much different type of movement than what you would be doing with the deadlift. And I want you to really kind of reinforce the exact movements you're going to be doing with the deadlift. And so that's our point two. So we've got connect with the core, and then we've got engage our lats. Number three here is open the hips. So why do we need to do this? Movement from the hips is going to aid in decreasing unwanted movement in the spine. So the hips and the lower back really closely interconnected. If you have really tight hips, you may get more rounding or movement in your lower back because your hips are super tight and they're not having as much movement as we would like. It's also going to ensure that the hamstrings are not excessively tight, and the hamstrings attach to the ischial tuberosities, which is kind of like the bottom of the bowl of your hips. And if you're pulling on that area, you're going to pull yourself into a posterior pelvic tilt, which is going to round the spine a little bit more. So you don't want your hamstrings pulling your lower back into more flexion, and you want to have enough length in those hamstrings and within your hips to be able to get down to the bar and have the stance you need to have without it actually recruiting extra flexion from your lower back.
Right.
So what are some ways to do this? Foam rolling is a great way just to kind of loosen it up. And I'm going to talk about static stretching here at the end, because maybe right here is not the best time for static stretching. So we'll talk about that, but also some dynamic hamstring stretching and hip exercises. So things like a deep squat and kind of squatting from left to right, kind of like a classic squat. Or if you Google deep squat with my name, you'll see an exercise I'm talking about. Or doing some hip circles, which I have a video of that as well, but I'm just trying to really open up my hip and circle my hip around a tall foam roller and really open up my hips, lubricate the joint. And then one thing I really like to do at the bar prior to deadlifting, you got the plates on both ends. I'm going to take my feet, put them against the plate, and push outwardly into those plates, really get a good stretch in my groin. And with that, I can lean left and right and obviously get a stretch on, whichever side I want to feel, or I feel like I'm a little more tighter. And I also really like, this goes back to point one of connecting with your core. Do that where your feet are pressing actively against the plates of the barbell. You're actively pushing out. You're feeling a real good stretch in your groin. And then I like to hip hinge. So I'm trying to essentially, I'm in a nice tall vertical position, keep that push with my feet. And I just start doing like a good morning, making my trunk really vertical and sending my butt out. And I'm actually, when I do it, I hold on to my belly and I'm trying to connect with the core and not have that movement of the spine, but just kind of flex and extend via my hip and really get that nice and rehearsed and lubricated before I perform that movement, essentially with the deadlift and with the weight. So that's one of my favorite ways to open up the hip at the bar. Those other exercises will be really great. If you're warming up in general before your workout routine, that'll be great. And that really helps. And I like performing that hip hinge pattern because we're going to talk about that in our next point, and it's going to help you connect with that core musculature. And again, when we're connecting with that core musculature, one of the cues I really like, one of the easiest ones for people to understand, squeeze the belly button in and up towards the spine, or think about sucking on a tight pair of pants, right? It's after Thanksgiving, you're trying to get the belt one more notch tighter than it should be, and you kind of have to suck up and engage your belly button in and up. Or another cue that really works for people is think about someone's going to punch you in the gut in all different areas, and you're kind of bracing for that and being prepared for that contact. So we've got connect with the core musculature, engage the lats, and open up the hips. The last thing, this one's also at the bar. So I've done all those other three things, and now I'm at the bar. I'm getting ready to deadlift, and I like to grease the groove or rehearse the movement pattern. And why is this important? It's important because it's going to help prime the nervous system and kind of ensure all these cues that we talked about are kind of like locked into your muscle memory. So when I say rehearse the movement pattern, I mean perform a weightless or body weight deadlift essentially. And I'll really take my time easing into it. And I'll do this 5 to 20 times before I actually pick up the weight and just try and rehearse the movement and really lock in that pattern before adding the resistance. And so what is that pattern? I love this. This is something I really started to look into after I hurt my back, is breaking the deadlift down into 2 movements. So we're going to do a hip hinge, which I talked a lot about a hip hinge, but one of my favorite ways to cue a hip hinge is, let's say you're standing up completely straight. There's a drawer behind you that's open, and you just want to close the drawer with your butt. So you are just moving the butt back. Everything else is trying to stay nice and neutral. Another way I found people to really understand it, you're standing up, someone has a rope around your hips or your waist, and they're just pulling that backwards from behind you, and you're just getting your hips pulled back. And so focusing on the hip hinge. And then the second part, we've all done a leg press where you're, maybe you're laying, we've done those machines where you're like laying on your back and you're pressing the weight vertically on that platform. I think even I've seen a video of you doing it, Keoni, with the concurrent shoulder chest press from the metabolic effect workouts.
Right.
So those are like the 2 ways to break the movement down. It's first hip hinge, and then you're going to leg press or squat the weight from the ground to your knees. So I'm going to break that down a little bit more, but we're hip hinging to get to a certain area, or once we get to our knees, and then we're going to let our knees bend like we're squatting or doing that leg press to get to the bar. And then we're going to leg press the floor away until we get to our knees. And then we're going to hip hinge the rest of the way by engaging the glutes. So breaking it all down, starting from the top, you're just standing neutral at the bar, bars right along, your shoelaces, your feet are under the bar. And let's say you're listening to this and you want to rehearse the movement, that'd be great. So let your hands rest on your thighs, hip hinge until your hands reach the level of your knees. So you're standing naturally, standing upright, hands are along your thighs. You're going to stick your butt out, keep sticking your butt out, keep sticking your butt out till your hands reach your kneecaps. Once your hands reach your kneecaps, bend the knees the rest of the way to actually get the hands to the bar level. Once you're at that bar level, you've grasped the bar. From here, you're going to lock your shoulders in. You're going to engage your lats, right? One of those cues. So you want to engage your lats to keep the bar tracking as close to possible. And then you're going to initiate the lift by performing that leg press type movement. So like you're doing just a leg press, that laying back type leg press on the machine, and you are just pushing the floor away, just like we talked about with that machine, until the bar reaches your knee level. Once the bar reaches your knee level, you're really going to squeeze your bottom and drive through your hips and your glutes to reverse that hip hinge and come to upright standing. So as I'm rehearsing or greasing the groove at the gym, I'm standing upright, letting my hands rest on my thighs. Once my hands get to knee level, I'm allowing the knees to now bend to reach the level of the bar. From there, I want my quads to really push my feet away through the floor. And then once my hands come back to knee level, really engaging my glutes to get to upright standing. And that's the safest way to think about it, is to break it down to those two movements, a hip hinge, and then more so of a leg press. And then we leg press the floor away, and then we squeeze our bottom to bring the bar to our hips and come to upright standing.
That's great. That's great. I never thought about the deadlift that way.
And it really helps, getting those cues down really helps you rehearse the movement well. It really helps ensure, because if you do from the bottom, you really start squeezing your glutes, you have a chance to round out your back a little bit more. And it's not that you aren't engaging your glutes. I mean, that it's not like you're not engaging your glutes to do the leg press type thing, but It's more quad dominant, and it's just a different cue. Pushing the floor away to stand up. Once you're at that knee level, that's when you're hip hinging the rest of the way till you're upright at your hips. So basically you can break it down through your knees. So if you're looking at a mirror, or if you're just feeling it, anytime your hands, as you're reaching your hands towards the knee, it's a hip hinge. Once you're past the knee, it's a leg press, and past the knee being closer to the ground, below the lower leg distally. And then once you're reaching up from the ground, you're leg pressing away. And then once you get to the knees, it's a hip hinge again. So those knees are kind of your barrier, your personal cue on your body as far as where you should kind of turn these cues on and off and really think about it. As far as that sequence goes, I know I'm doing it through words instead of like demonstrating it. That all right, Keoni, or any like?
I think for me it is. I mean, I do the deadlift. I think for people that aren't that familiar with the move, and I think most people should do it, or everybody that should try to do it, because it really helps. It's really helped my back. But for people that aren't familiar with it, just check out your videos of those exercises you're talking about.
Yeah. And I do have I think a kettlebell deadlift one, but after doing this podcast, I'll put up like a grease the groove type of movement rehearsal.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So people can see. And so go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I was just gonna say I try to have my my workout groups that I do in the evenings after clinic shift is on leg day. I try to have everybody that can do the deadlift.
Yeah. And there's a million ways to do it, right? And that's partially why I gave that little caveat at the front, but also even just, if you're trying to get your goal, Keoni, of 400 pounds, you really want to be mindful of these cues. You really want to be mindful of the reps and the sets and that sort of thing. And then, if someone's deadlifting, and I do this too, like 95 pounds or something that would seem lighter for a deadlift, you just you focus on performing it this same way. Yeah. And you really, you just build up and kind of make it more appropriate based off how many. And I would add, and I'm going to touch on this a little later, but I would add, if it's lighter weight, you can do more reps. But the deadlift, depending on how much weight you're really trying to do, like for Keoni's goal, it's not something you want to do super, super high reps, not necessarily anything wrong with that, but you just want to decrease that margin of error as always. Because the most important thing, especially for me, is not to get hurt. And we want to keep training.
Yeah, definitely. Keep the consistency up.
And that's how you're going to get the most improvements, keeping that consistency up. But just as a reminder, go through it real quickly. The pre-deadlift routine. Step 1, let's connect with our core musculature, focus on spinal stabilization, getting that belly button in and up, connecting with our core as a whole, meaning a whole 3D kind of room that we have of our core, top and bottom and on the sides, and really getting that nice and engaged so we can maintain a little bit of that core control as we're lifting heavier weights. We want to get those lats engaged so we can keep that bar glued to our body and hovering in that nice straight vertical line. Going to make the movement more efficient, which is going to make you be able to lift 400 pounds a little bit quicker than if you were doing it sloppily.
Yeah.
And then also it's just going to help, again, keep the core engaged and keep the bar closer to you, which is going to decrease the stress on your lower back. We want to open up the hips. That way our hips aren't limiting our ability to get down to the bar. And thus we're not rounding our lower back or having a lot of stress go through the lower back. So really open up those hips. And then we're at the bar. We've done those 3 steps and we want to grease the groove, rehearse the movement pattern, rehearse that sequence I talked about of hip hinge, kind of leg press to hip hinge. And really make sure we have that locked in with all these cues, right? So with that, while I don't have the bar, I'm pushing into my thighs to try and keep my lats engaged and to get all these cues kind of focused in, kind of become some muscle memory and make sure they carry over to when I do add some resistance to the bar. And that just speaks to why we do like the core control, engage the lats and all that. Just engage all this and make it one big functional movement. And that's where, again, rehearsing the movement pattern comes into play, make sure we have all that down and we carry it over with us.
Yeah, these big movements like squat, deadlift, snatches, it really is. If you get that technique down, I mean, you can really improve your lifts tremendously.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, lifting more, just being more efficient that way and putting the stress where it's supposed to go. Because I say your body's designed for stress. It's just about where that stress is going. And once you make it more efficient, it's safer. And it's in, I've seen people take a 10 to 25 pound jump in what they could or what they thought they could deadlift just by cleaning it up.
Yeah. Cleaning up the movement.
So those are the big cues. Connect the core, engage the lats, open the hips, and rehearse the movement pattern. Just some little bonus information I want to give just to make sure you got a decent type of grasp on the deadlift. Is kind of this eccentric control, which would be like controlling the bar on the way down versus letting the bar slam down to the ground. So I'm never going to say any one thing is bad. It's always dependent on what you're doing, how you're doing it, what the purpose is, and that sort of thing. But there's a time and place for both. So if it's very heavy, as a rule, though, generally, it's probably not a time for much eccentric control. So if Keoni's, on Saturday, you want to try to hit that 400 pounds, then that's probably not the best time to really try and slowly get it back down to the ground.
Right.
So really use your personal judgment. And I'm just going to give an example of like my personal deadlift day. So I've done these things. I've done these cues. I've connected to the core. I've rehearsed the movement. And I'm going to warm up with 2 sets of 8 reps at a lighter weight that I can handle very well. So like 135 pounds. And I'm doing 2 sets of 8. And here I'm going to eccentrically control it to the ground. And when I eccentrically control it to the ground, I'm just trying to rehearse that sequence just the same, sticking my butt out. Once that bar, I'm standing up and the weight's in my hands and I'm upright. Once that bar is, I'm going to bring it back to the ground. I'm going to hinge my hips. Once the bar hits the kneecaps, I'm going to let my knees bend and slowly control it back to the ground. But with that, I'm controlling a weight that I feel very confident in. It doesn't feel significantly heavier. And there I'm doing a few more reps, which speaks on what I was talking about a little bit earlier. So I'm doing like 8 reps or something like that. Then the next thing I'll do is do 2 rounds of 4 reps or 2 sets of 4 reps at a significantly heavier weight. So like 100+ pounds heavier. And this I'm not going to eccentrically control. So this I am standing up and I'm more or less letting it come back to the ground with gravity. I'm not really trying to control that at all.
Yeah.
And that's just all I wanted to express there is personal choice, and you need to use your own personal judgment on when you should eccentrically control it. There's definitely a time to eccentrically control it, because if you pick up an Amazon box and something fragile is in it, you're not just going to let it slam back down to the ground when you want to put it down. So there's certainly a time and place for everything, always. But the heavier it is, probably not the best time to try and focus on eccentrically controlling it, in short.
Yeah. So they're in.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, that I was going to go on to my final point. So if it's
go
relevant.
ahead.
So here, talking about the stretching, just because I want to talk about this, when I was talking about the hips and making sure the hamstrings aren't limiting your movement or aren't excessively tight, we do see in the research that static stretching, which is like, hey, stretching your hamstring for 60 seconds and like just holding a stretch, is not the best for force production, meaning before you go lift weights. It's not going to be your best option. And why that is we've talked about muscles. They kind of work like Velcro, where you have like, myofibrils or two sticky segments that kind of connect to each other and develop that tension. And thus, just like Velcro, there's a certain length tension, there's a certain length relationship that's going to make the Velcro better, right? If the Velcro is all crinkled up on one portion, it's not going to be as powerful and resisting being pulled apart. Or if it's really stretched out, it's also not going to be as powerful, as opposed to both ends being really flushed and really developing that power. To develop power in the muscle is exactly how it would work with the muscle. And so static stretching kind of disrupts that force production curve, kind of that Velcro analogy. And so instead of thinking about stretching the hamstrings, what we want to do is ignite these muscles and prepare them for the loads they're about to encounter. And so with like the hamstring, doing something more like a dynamic hamstring stretch where you're eccentrically lengthening it with tension is going to be a little bit better, because it's kind of exactly what you're going to do with the deadlift. And you're going to use the power of the muscle to reach kind of a deeper stretch, but it's not just static holding and kind of pulling that Velcro apart at both ends. You're going to basically get the Velcro warmed up and lubricated to produce, the stickiness that you're going to want from these muscles. So ignite the muscles to prepare for work. Think like flexibility as opposed to stretch here. And that's similar to grease the groove, kind of priming the muscle for the movement or the demands that we're about to encounter. And that's it. Those are the big things. Focus on connecting with the core, engage the lats, open the hips, and then rehearse the movement pattern. There's a time and a place for eccentric control. There's a time and a place for everything within your physical body. Just having some good personal judgment on when that time and place is for you. And being aware of static stretching may not be the best thing if you're thinking about going and lifting heavy weights or whatnot.
Right. Cool. Anything else?
That's it. Other than that, if you are looking for a program, I did want to pump up my Be Well Beyond promo, or my Be Well Beyond program. What that is, it's an individualized program to you. So you work with me and it's completely individualized to your situation, your goals, maybe your injury history, or kind of what you've got going on. And the way I like to express it to people is it's kind of like having a financial planner for your life. So we're working on your short-term goals while not sacrificing our long-term vision and getting injured and those sorts of things as well. So I'd love to work with you in that capacity if you thought this was helpful.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah, very cool. I a couple questions though. Just I hear all kinds of things, but is there really a difference between the sumo and the a sumo deadlift and a regular deadlift, as far as, is one better than the other? What muscles are we engaging? What's the difference there?
Yeah, yes and no. Always.
Yeah, okay.
Always
Okay.
yes and no.
Yeah,
So,
I figured, because I see even people that deadlift will switch it up all the time, like how they do them.
yeah, well, that goes to one of my favorite monikers of kind of training as a personal trainer. I heard this a lot. The best workout routine is the one you're not currently doing. And that's just
Yeah.
goes
Yeah.
to show, you do want to switch it up. You do want to try
Right.
different things. I would say with the sumo, you're probably getting a little bit more glute work, and it depends how you're doing it, right? If you're standing, typically the way I've seen it is when people are doing a sumo, they're really letting their knees spread out wide, and they're staying much more vertical through the trunk.
Right.
And
Yeah.
just trying to essentially leg press and squeeze the glutes to lift it up. So I'm going to say you're going to get a little bit more leg work there, possibly, as opposed to more back work, but I haven't looked at like an EMG type of study to necessarily
Right.
prove
Yeah.
that. And is there one better than the other? Yeah, the one probably you're not doing. So not necessarily, because I would
Right.
say the sumo deadlift is not like picking up, an Amazon box. Whereas this deadlift, the standard conventional deadlift, a little bit more like the functional movements that we do.
Right. Yeah.
But there's nothing inherently wrong or incorrect about the sumo deadlift either. So yes, no, maybe so is
Right.
always the
Yeah.
answer.
Definitely with training. Right. But what in competition though? I mean, I guess you do both too, right? Or does it matter? I guess it's just like a deadlift is a deadlift, or I don't know. I really don't. I'm wondering if you knew.
And so what do you mean by competition? Because I
Well,
know.
so what's the deadlift they primarily do? Like, what's the Olympic standard deadlift? It's not.
I think they break it down into both. I
Oh,
honestly
really?
do.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I don't
I'm not
know.
an
I
expert
don't
there
know.
as far as how
Yeah.
they do like the competitions and stuff, but I've seen people sumo deadlift in, the the onesie or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I've seen people do conventional. I would imagine, I'm not 100% sure, but you're probably stronger in the conventional one. But the conventional one
I
also.
am. I feel that way a
I
little
honestly
bit.
have only done the sumo a few times.
Well, see, and
Yeah,
that's my problem. I can't really speak to it because I rarely do it, and I think I need to train for that to really see. It's
and
just a different movement, so I'm used to the conventional
exactly.
movement. So when I go in there and try to see if I could sumo the same weight, I can't. But it's just I haven't done it. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah. And I would imagine, yeah, it's definitely completely different in what you're recruiting, with your knees going out that wide, and then you're
Yeah.
not getting as horizontal, and kind of, I'm sure the
Right.
lats are engaged, but your arms are really just hanging down the whole time,
Yeah.
versus tracking that bar close to you. Um, like as you stand up versus
Right.
just squeezing your bottom to get taller is the way I see
But
it.
in training, it's good to switch it up. I mean,
Yeah.
definitely,
And
it is a different feel for me,
yeah, and
at least when
typical
I do it.
everyday training for the everyday person,
Yeah.
best workout is the one you're not currently doing.
Yeah. So, and the last thing I want to say, well, I like to think I'm not joking. Maybe I can do a 400-pound deadlift, but let me tell you, I'm not even close to that. And so just so people know out there, and correct me if you're wrong, if I'm wrong, Brian, because I don't know the numbers exactly, but a decent deadlift for somebody that's 50 or older is probably their body weight. That's a pretty decent, good deadlift. Once you get up to 1.5, that's a really incredible deadlift. Once you get to double your body weight, then it depends on your age. That's like, competition level deadlifting. So as you're younger, 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, naturally they're going to be able to pound for pound deadlift more,
Yeah.
and they're going to be able to recover better also. So
Yeah. And then understanding these adaptations. So, Keoni getting to 400 pounds is not him deadlifting. As a matter of fact, it's how much time and how well he rests in between. And that's when
yeah,
all these things are that's when he's getting stronger. He's actually
yeah,
doing damage training for the
right,
deadlift and stuff like that. And you need to
right,
allow enough time to improve that. And that goes to your lower back health as well. You got like end plates that get stronger, the actual spine getting stronger and more resilient, the vertebrae, the muscles getting stronger to produce that force, maintain that good core control, and all that sort of stuff. And then when, I just hesitate to give huge generalizations, because like with that, be well beyond, be completely dependent on your goals. So, you're not wrong in, your body weight is a good goal to have to be able to deadlift. But, what is your goal is really
yeah.
where I would start.
Well, I'm just saying that's like if you're trying to gauge where people that do deadlifts and what their age is at a fit level. I mean, if you're a 185-pound man and you're over 50 years old, I mean, deadlifting 185, that's a respectable deadlift for that age.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So, but for me, I just going back to the back, the two things that I think really helped my back pain over the years when I was 20s and 30s was squatting and finally doing it right and not worrying about what weight you're doing, and deadlifts, both of those. I mean, I used to have back pain where I'd be, walking across campus and I'd be on the ground and have to like hobble to my dorm room in my 20s. And I haven't had anything like that since, doing these exercises with really good form.
Yeah, you definitely want to check the ego at the door sort of thing, not care
Yeah.
about how much weight you're actually doing and worry about how well you're doing it. And you are more likely as a younger person, because your discs are a lot more imbibed with fluid, to have kind of those situations like Keoni was talking about. Not that you wouldn't hurt your back if you did this incorrectly, older, someone above 40 or 50. But the younger you are, the more likely you are to herniate a disc, versus the older you are, the less likely you are to actually herniate discs. But you could cause other problems doing it incorrectly. So really, just make sure you warm up for the deadlift. You do the proper things, engage the proper things to be ready to do that compound movement and do it well.
Well, I'm excited. I'm gonna institute some of those things you're talking about today.
The last thing, just as it comes to mind, Keoni, is I do throw in like decompression with this. So like a great thing to do is in between, like I gave that example of my kind of deadlift routine there where I might do 2 sets of 8 and then 2 sets of 4. In between like those 2 sets of 8, I'm doing a weighted chin up, which is pulling my
pulling
back,
your spine down.
it's decompressing my back from the compression of doing the deadlift. So working that into those sorts of days is also going to be really helpful.
I have to do that. I have to decompress after my leg workout day also, not to mention in between sets. We're lucky at my gym because we just have a nice, easy to get into inversion table, and you can get out, takes seconds. And again, that helps too.
Yeah. And if you're doing it right, you can incorporate it into the workout, right? So as I'm doing these weighted chin-ups, I'm hitting my back, and I do my deadlifts on a back day primarily. And so with that, I'm not necessarily taking a break from training. I'm still keeping it moving, but I'm doing something positive to reverse any sort of negative things that could come up from compressing my back with the deadlift, and trying to undo that as I still progress through my workout.
Right.
Cool. All right, everybody.
Very cool.
Until next week, be well. Yes. Happy deadlifting. Happy lower back.
All right. Take care, everybody.